You're tuning in to Wellfound's Ask a Recruiter, where we sit down with recruiters to share their advice on the hiring process. So I'm really excited to have Emilio Arias here today on this webinar Q&A on how AI tools are actually affecting your job applications. We were really excited about the amount of questions that we had, and we see that this was a good topic to have right now for sure. So I'm going to just introduce a little bit of how this is going to work and who's presenting it, and I'll introduce Emilio, and then we'll get right to our question and answer for this session. So firstly, the questions, we're going to start with our intake survey questions. These are questions directly from you. I'm going to show who asked them from the survey. While we're doing that, feel free to ask additional questions into the chat. And so before we get into introducing Emilio, I just wanted to acknowledge that this is presented by Wellfound. Wellfound helps you get hired by cutting edge startups. This has also been expanded to publicly owned companies and larger corporations because Wellfound's been around for 10 years. We've kind of grown with companies that use us. We've made over 8 million matches and have over 150,000 tech jobs in our system, and 25,000 startups use us. So if you don't know about Wellfound, this is like a new introduction for you. Feel free to sign up. People like me and Kat, who's on the call, are the people who help you if you need help as a job seeker or as a recruiter. Awesome. So onto the good stuff. We have Emilio here with us. He has spent the last decade helping candidates land roles at tech giants like Meta, Google, and Uber, as well as scrappy startups like Rad AI, where he works right now, and Rula. He is hired for just about every role in tech, from software interns to product designers to sales, etc., and has seen how AI is reshaping the hiring landscape. Like most recruiters, he fell into the field by accident, which I would love to hear more about, but found a deep love of understanding people and building meaningful, authentic relationships throughout his career. He's excited to help us today in navigating the evolving and occasionally chaotic job market with more clarity, more confidence, and a little less stress, which are all things I can totally get behind. So thank you so much for for joining us today, Emilio. And I know you wanted to give a little intro before we jumped into some of the Q&As that are prepared.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for that intro. It's kind of funny seeing everything encapsulated like that. I used to feel so insecure about how many jobs I had had. So now, looking back in reflection, it's like, oh wait, that turns out that was wisdom. And maybe if you do end up getting laid off from a couple different places, you too can find yourself speaking to a bunch of other people from that wisdom about that wisdom. So it's just kind of interesting to see it all laid out that way. So thank you for the warm intro. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. The main thing I wanted to get across is that this is a weird time. This is a weird time to be a job seeker. It is a weird time to be in tech. It is a weird time to be searching for a career change. It is chaotic. It is fraught. It is odd. I mean, just in the time that I got tapped to do this, there's another round of layoffs going on. So I just want to lead with that I totally understand. And I too have been a job seeker these last few years, and it seems like it's been nothing but doom and gloom. But I'm here to tell you that it's not. The fact that you are here, the fact that you are at this webinar, that you are still seeking community, you are seeking connections, you're trying to find answers. That is 90% of it. That is going to get you over the hump. That is going to get you there. Something I like to say to some of my coaching clients I work with is it only takes one. It only takes one to make all the other rejections, all the other applications that didn't work out fade away, and you forget about it, right? So you're one call away, you're one interview away from landing the next good thing, which will lead to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, right? Like I just said a few moments ago, feeling so insecure about how many times I've been laid off, let go, restructured, managed out, and now it all of that leads you to the next big good thing. Little did I know that my love of sci-fi and like reading about AI and robots as a kid was somehow going to have me talk to all of you. This whole thing is just wild, but really glad to be here. Excited to meet you all. And your questions all had a theme to them. And I could sense the stress, the anxiety, the fear. It's real, it's there. But so hopefully I'm here to kind of tease out what's real, what's not, and what I've experienced. And I want to make it clear. I am but one person, one recruiter. This has been my experience I'm going to speak from. If you were to ask 1,000 of us, you're going to get just as many of those answers differently. So I'm only speaking from my experience, and I'm just glad to be able to share.
Awesome. And that has also been my experience asking a lot of recruiters is slightly different answers from everyone, but everyone has something so unique to share that ends up helping our community here that join these calls. So the first question that we had is about AI and ATS. It's from Lobna, who I saw is on the call, which is great. I love it when people
Thank you, Labna.
they asked the question. They asked, I'd love your insight on how AI and applicant tracking systems are shaping hiring today. Are these tools being used to filter candidates? And what strategies do you think are most effective for standing out in that process? And I think we wanted to also like kind of jump, like tie these together, right, Amelia?
Yep.
Kira also asked, and I hope they're here too, it's about tailoring resumes. There's quite a lot of overlap with this question that how do
Yeah.
I format it for AI and how do I format it for the ATS? And then just in general, like how do we get an advantage doing this? So they ask, a lot of sources note that tailored resumes are the key to getting seen. However, there isn't consistent advice on how to do this, which I think is very true. At first, AI was suggested to be utilized to help identify the key terms and metrics to highlight from a job description. But when everybody is doing this, is that really the best path? How would you suggest to tailor resumes manually in impactful ways to get noticed?
Yeah, yeah. I know we were talking about this before the call, but this notion that the big bad ATS, right? The applicant tracking system and how it's this just, big gatekeeper between you and your career. I have to dryly laugh at that a little bit because more often than not, we are fighting our ATSs to just work the way that we want them to. Let alone as this like really impressive AI driven tool. Of course, we are starting to see a lot more AI integrations, a lot more tools, and really efficiency modules get interplayed. But at the end of the day, you ask most recruiters, and they'll most of them will roll their eyes because we are often fighting our ATSs. We use one at Rad AI called Ashby. Shout out to Ashby. I think they make an incredible product. It is so user friendly. The UI is awesome. It's the first time I've ever felt like I truly love an ATS. But before I dive in the ATS, I want to take a step back and I want to give everyone a little bit of grounding and like distill down what it is that we do as recruiters, right? Particularly internal recruiters working at tech companies. And at the end of the day, what we are doing is we are trying to fill the highest priority roles in the most efficient way possible and match you to them, right? It really is that simple. And so from that perspective, there's a couple components that go into that. We're looking to de-risk. Hiring managers often want to de-risk their hires. Are they someone you could see coming in, especially as the more senior level you get up? Do they have an understanding of your skills and who you are, what you bring to the table? And are you ready to make the move? Are you ready to jump? Are you ready to showcase that and communicate that, fluidly and clearly? So obviously the main the main way of doing that is your resume and applications. But there's multiple different avenues. There's multiple, we call them, in recruiting world, we call it the top of the funnel, which is all the different streams and avenues in which a job seeker might approach us. And you should be looking at it the same way, right? Your resume is just one tool to get out there, to put your foot in the door for a company. But you also have to think about passive leads. Is your LinkedIn up to date? Are you garnering is the most best information out there for someone to be able to find you, to be able to match you to the right job? Are you using different streams? Are you connecting in different ways, right? The application game is one way to do it. Most of my hires come from applicants, believe it or not. And that is because an applicant in our mind is someone who is engaged, someone who's interested, someone who's read the job description ideally, and who's ready to make the jump. So they meet some of that criteria that we're already looking for, right? But now getting in a little bit more to the ATS, itself. So, you know, again, I think there's this misconception that ATSs are this big bad gatekeeper, but really at the end of the day, they are tools. They're databases, often messy ones, often chaotic ones that we're just trying to parse through and keep up with the overwhelming load that comes our way, right? So, I think being able to write the correct resume in this age of AI, something that I've been noticing and that's come up a lot is you are starting to see people. I mean, frankly, I think folks are starting to overthink it. And it's completely understandable based on a lot of the, information we're getting and all the discourse around it. But what I'm starting to see is a lot of resumes that have, for lack of a better word, gimmicks, graphics, different fonts, like really fancy looking things, for a software engineering role. And that ties into another point I wanted to make is know the role that you're looking for. Actually read and do your homework on it because that really, the more incisive, the more connected, the more we are able to look at your resume at a glance and glean from it, have the thought process we have in our head. Is the person ready to jump? Do they meet the skills? Is this someone I want to talk to? Do they have the resources and the means to be successful here? You have that information, right? And so you need to relay that to us as clearly and concisely as possible. So there's almost, I know this is going to sound sort of counterintuitive, but in this era of a lot of resumes looking the same and people utilizing I still think AI is a tool that you should all be using as well. You also have access to these tools, right? That you can utilize and gather your thoughts and put the information out there. But doubling down on clarity, doubling down on your human component, crafting your story as best you can in those bullet points, that is doubly as important now, right? And trying to squeeze your way around an ATS with graphics. And I had a resume come through the other day where someone had put a bunch of keywords and like invisible font. That's you're overthinking it. You've gotten to that point. And I think this is where sort of this era of AI has got us a little bit twisted into knots. Doubling down on the basics, I think, is almost more. The dash. Oh my God. Yeah, the dash. Kill me with the dash. John. The dash is get rid of it. Kill it now because it's a great indicator that, used AI, which again is not bad. We're all using it now. But making it your own individuality, your skills come through, doubling down on that is important. So best strategy, if I could summarize it all, make sure your resume is parsable, is scannable, no text boxes, graphics, or columns, unless it's a design role, right? That this is not applicable across the role, unless this is a product design role, unless this is a type of role that would require that. So doubling down on clarity, consistency, and making sure that the formatting is clear and concise, that you are evaluating the work that you've done. And at the end of the day, the AI tools that we use in our ATSs, they're designed to stack rank and make things more efficient. They're not designed necessarily to filter out, right? They're using keywords and inference, which is what ATSs have been using for decades now at this point. So, write for clarity. The recruiter will thank you. The algorithm will thank you. That is the best advice I could give when it comes to writing resumes and making them accessible and parsable. I had someone just the other day, amazingly written resume, very clearly done with a lot of intention, and they misspelled their email address. I had to go to the ends of the earth to find them on LinkedIn and reach out to them and say, hey, we're really interested in you for this job, but I'm not able to reach your email address. And in horror, they realized they had completely left out one letter. So again, the basics still matter. Even in this age of AI, the basics, I would say doubling down on them is just as important, if not more so.
Yeah, and maybe that person ran it through ChatGPT to see if they could edit it, but they don't know your email address, so you sort of are like resting on this like AI morals or something. We had just a related question. Daryl was asked, so graphics equal good or they're bad or they don't? I guess your answer is sort of when it's applicable, then use graphics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's when that goes into the next point I wanted to make, and like that's know the role you're applying for, right? And I know that kind of runs counter to the volume game that you kind of have to play as an applicant, but it still behooves you to know the company and the role that you're applying for, right? It still matters so much to read about the company section, find one to two of the keywords unique to their mission, their product, what it is they're trying to do. So yeah, in summary, graphics, if important, if necessary, if relevant, and I would extend that to discuss all things related to your resume. So if you're looking for design jobs, showcase that. If you are just trying to relay your experience, save the space. Just give us the words, give us the numbers, give us the data, give us the detail, because that's what we're looking for as recruiters, and that's what the ATSs and the filters are going to pick up.
Awesome. Okay, we have some related questions in the chat also. They're a little bit more in depth, so I might save them, but
Sure.
Jessica is kind of related to what we're talking about as far as like for designers. Maybe Jessica, actually, you want to ask your question out loud?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi,
Yeah,
Jessica.
I'm just wondering about if you have thoughts on adding a portfolio or a Loom in the initial application form, whether it's requested or not. I was saying I'm a marketer, so I know designers typically show their portfolio. Marketers don't typically have a portfolio to show. But I applied for a job at a AI tech company, and they had asked, it was at Airtable, I think, and they had asked for, show optionally, but I think not optionally, show us your a loom of how you're using AI in your workflows today, or link to a Google Drive or some sort of portfolio.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you, Jessica. I would say don't be the one to eliminate information if you don't have to, right? The filters are already going to do that for you. So if you have the space, if you have the means, if it even anecdotally can move the needle 1%, right? Adding more information to your resume, to your portfolio, and it doesn't take up extra space. If it's the question you should always be asking yourself is look at it from the eyes of the recruiter and the hiring manager. Is this relevant, parsable information that if I look at, it will make me more confident this person can fill the role, right? So if you have a portfolio that you're proud of, that's relevant, that showcases skills and not necessarily roles, because I think portfolios often showcase skills and like projects and case studies. And if I can look at that as a recruiter and say, oh, wow, these weren't in the resume or these flesh out the things in the resume, that's only to your benefit, right? And if there's a line in the application form to do that, and it doesn't cost you a bunch of time, because I know people talk about CV, should I write a CV every time? No reason not to do it, right? So being able to add that information never hurts if it's not taking up space and it's not concise and relevant to the role you're applying for. And I know that can be a little bit of a gray area in a role such as marketing that may or may not look at a portfolio. So I would say err on the side of caution.
Cool, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, great question. And actually, you touched on something I was going to talk about next. So, a lot of folks ask me like how to write the resume, like what should I be putting? And, okay, yes, I've read the job description and it has these bullet points, but like, what do I need to say? What's the secret sauce? I would say mirror what they're looking for, right? Mirror outcomes. So this is top of mind just because I'm recruiting machine learning research scientists right now. If the role says we're looking for someone who has deployed ML models into production in the health tech space, and you have that experience, mirror it. I've deployed transformer-based NLP models to production to over 5 million users, and it led to this much growth, right? Formulaic, A plus B plus C, because that, again, clear, concise, and showcases to me, you read the job description, you have the skills that we're looking for, and you've done it at the scope and the way which is relevant. Now I'm going to take that a step back because I know that that's relevant to certain roles, and I know that's relevant to certain seniorities. If you're earlier in your career and you just don't have that much experience and it's not there, then lean into the skills, right? There's nothing you can do. Focus on the things you can control. There's nothing you can do about not having experience, but you can control the skills that you have, how you're growing them, and what you have done. So make sure to always be showcasing that no matter what, and mirror it as best you can. Yeah, that's the information you have that's in your control.
Awesome. And that kind of segues nicely into the next question that we have loaded up here. And that's about like how to level up. So you Yang asked what skills or qualities will become more important in an AI-driven hiring world. And maybe you've got some indications of that since you're hiring for machine learning. So anything that you can think of that is like what people should be focusing on, especially if they're laid off and maybe they're trying to upskill, in the interim.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's like I remember when the early days of the internet, for those of us that are old enough to remember, and it felt like everything was a discovery and going to a new website. I'm going to learn a new skill and I have all this information at my fingertips. Like, wow, I'm going to become a painter or a coder. And then you realize very quickly, at least in my case, that like, okay, there's only so much you can do to parse this information. I feel like we're at the second version 2.0 of that now with the Gen AI boom. Like you should see my chat GPT. It's like I'm learning how to DJ and do, according to my chat GPT, I'm trying to learn everything and upskill everywhere. Oh, I think it's impressive, it's interesting, it's fun. And it brings me back to a point that I said earlier about you also have these tools, right? You also have access to these things. You also can upskill and uplevel yourself and fill in the gaps and, do things massively at a scale that you could not do before, right? So it's not about necessarily trying to contort yourself and bring all the skills in that you already have done. It's about showing them and it's about communicating them effectively, whether it's written or whether it's verbally in an interview, right? So, getting to Younga's question here, I thought this was so great because it speaks to kind of what we're all thinking about, like how do we maintain a competitive edge? How do we maintain a competitive balance? And for better or for worse, you can have your opinions on it. AI is here. AI is here to stay. So it's role dependent, but with the democratization of all this information and knowledge and outsourcing our thinking to AI tools, I think this echoes what I said earlier. It's all the more critical you lean into the wisdom that you do have, right? That's something that AI cannot take away, the experience and the wisdom that you do have. So as much as I love my sci-fi and wonder if there's a day in which the singularity will occur and we'll all become androids, I really highly doubt that's going to happen in our lifetime. I do think there's a lot of hyperbole around what it's going to do and what it can do. I think what we're seeing right now is something of a gold rush. I'm old enough to remember like 3 distinct tech bubbles, all of which eventually collapsed, and then the cream rose to the crop, right? And yes, this touches on that next question too a little bit. So, at the end of the day, someone's got to drive this ship. The robots are not there yet. So whether we want to or not, AI literacy is important. Understanding what it can do for you, understanding how the models work, understanding how it can up level and make more efficient your job and what you do. I have ADHD. I really struggle with executive functioning. I really struggled earlier in my career to start projects. I would get overloaded. I would get overwhelmed, pulling in different resources and who to talk to. It was all noise. And I have often joked so many times, like, where was ChatGPT when I was in college? Where was ChatGPT when I was earlier in my career? Because that's where I have found the most effectiveness in seeing how it works for me is pulling these projects together, right? The genesis, the start of it. And then I'm able to be more efficient, be more effective, and then execute more effectively. Because the execution was never the problem. It was the executive functioning. It was muddling through the ambiguity. And I now have a pocket consultant to do that. And as much as I resisted it at first because I didn't want to outsource my thinking, as I like to put it, it's really been very beneficial from that perspective. I touched on this earlier too, but in terms of leveling up in an AI-driven world, specifically to this, doubling down on the human component, right? AI, we still do in-person interviews. And I don't see that changing for the majority of the tech sphere anytime soon. So whether you need to train yourself to communicate things more effectively, whether you need to train yourself on that system design interview, doubling down on your cross-functional communication collaboration, doubling down on the examples you give, and practicing with people in your network and relying on the people that you have, doubling down on the things that AI can never touch. I think those are the things that you can hone in on. And again, it all goes back to what's in your control and what you can do. So if I had to boil it down to a few bullet points, AI literacy, your cross-functional communication and collaboration skills, your critical thinking, the things that AI can't do, your creativity and your synthesis, and then your adaptability and your ability to continuously learn and evolve and invest in you, because we're hiring you, the person, not your ability to use ChatGPT, but that could be one of your skills, right?
Awesome.
So that's how I would distill it.
Yeah, those are great points. And actually, we've been talking to some other recruiters on calls like this, and I think like in-person interviews are actually becoming even more important now that there's bad actors and things using deep fakes or whatever. Like, I think those things are gonna stay, evergreen and important for candidates to be relying on that in-person kind of ability to talk. Okay, and great. So we've got another question from Robin, and this is very relevant to, news this week. It's about AI and layoffs. So there's been a lot of big headlines about companies laying off workers to replace them with AI. What do you make of this new technological revolution, and how can we handle it right now while people are losing jobs?
Yeah, I mean, that's so top of mind. I mean, I've been the recipient of this in the last few years as well, so I get it, and it's scary. But I give a little anecdote. I was listening to a This American Life podcast, shout out to This American Life, and it was talking about the death of the telephone switchboard operator back when the automation started to happen, how the last of those jobs were gone by the late 70s. And there was a lot of discourse and ink being spilled at the time about how this was going to destroy the American middle class, because at one point, I think that was the number one employment choice for women in the United States and for people of color. because you didn't necessarily need a degree. You could learn on the job. It was a solid salary, it was a solid pay, and it was as stable as it could be. And of course, automation killed it. So there's all this ink being spilled. There's all this discourse on what it was going to do. And here we are, still standing, still able to. The American economy has not fully collapsed. Now, I'm not ignorant to the fact that this is a magnitude and order different, right? Like I know that that's true, and I know that this fear is very real, but companies are always going to find a way to cut costs, whether it's offshoring, whether it's automation. So these things were going to happen, and I do think there's something I mentioned earlier, something of a gold rush. And once the hype subsides, companies will start to realize, okay, we actually need humans. We need people to do these things. It kind of reminds me of the return to work orders we're seeing, right? Like I remember very clearly when my former employer and Mark Zuckerberg was up there on stage telling of us we're gonna lead the world in remote work. We're gonna change the world with all this. And next thing I knew, he was laying us all off and making everyone return back to work. So, I think there is hype. I also think there's reality. So, in talking more specifically about what do I make of this? What can people do? Continuously evolve. I know that might sound a little nebulous and ambiguous, but showing up to stuff like this, leaning on community more than ever, getting ahead of it and connecting with people in person or digitally, doubling down on the human component, right? So whether that's coming to webinars like this, connecting with people, helping each other out from that perspective, whether it's connecting with recruiters to talk to them, whether or not they have a job posted at that time. I think that's something I mentioned earlier. Oftentimes, by the time you're applying to a job, you're probably already behind the curve a little bit. So always keep in mind, keep your eye on certain companies and make sure that see where their hiring is and know the seasonality to certain things, right? We're doing headcount planning right now for a lot of next year. And then there's incremental things that happen, throughout the year. So knowing how those timelines work, staying in touch with people, having them keep you in mind, right? Great example. I just hired someone yesterday and we were not able to, it was about a month ago. I had to tell them, hey, sorry, we can't hire you right now. We're hiring these other people. But I said, but just hang tight because we might be able to open something new. I don't think he believed me when that happened. We rejected him. And then yesterday I talked to him and extended him an offer and he was over the moon. So, again, this goes back to what we're trying to do as recruiters. We are trying to fill roles as efficiently as possible. And if you make an impression and you are someone that the team remembers, when someone says we'll stay in touch, we usually mean that because there's nothing better than getting that person back. If they were a near miss or for whatever reason that the team had to just make a tough choice or whatever, there's nothing more satisfying than that. So AI causing layoffs, to bring it all home, the safest thing you can always do is just constantly be evolving and investing in yourself, your community, and the human component. That's how I would summarize that.
Awesome. And I love that story. I think it's really encouraging to hear that those callbacks actually happen. I definitely have gotten
often. Yeah, it's a lot of it's about timing. I cannot stress enough that it really can be about, that's sort of I think the great disservice of job seeking and job hunting. It's like those perfect jobs are there, but are they open at the time that you happen to be looking? And often those windows are very small and just don't overlap.
Yeah.
Right. And so how are the ways you can stay ahead of that, stay plugged in, stay tuned in, whether it's at certain recruiters, getting to know people at certain companies, staying involved in groups and webinars like this. This is how you beat that, in my opinion.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think this is our last question before we get to live questions. I think I'm right. We will find out the next slide. But Payush had a bunch of really topical questions. I'm going to read them out, and then I think we talked about this earlier that you kind of have like a big response to it, I think. So Payush asks, how is AI changing what qualified means today? Is AI really removing bias, or is it reshaping it? Which is one I'm personally very curious about.
Yeah.
What kind of roles might disappear or evolve because of AI in recruitment, which is very specific? And then how can candidates show their human edge in AI-driven processes? And what ethical and privacy concerns should job seekers be aware of? Because I feel like this is just a sort of black cloud that you can't see through from the candidate's point of view. So they have all these questions about what's going on behind the scenes.
Totally. Yeah. And these are all totally valid. And yeah, shout out to Payush. You kept me up late at night thinking about all these things last night as I was getting ready for this. These questions were, you know, it was so interesting seeing everyone's questions, and a lot of them focus on very technical things. And then you had just existential ones, and it was fascinating. So I appreciate the intention behind these. So, well, there's something I didn't touch on earlier that is correlated to this, and that is, we're also seeing a rise. We talk about how AI is changing what qualified means today, how it's changing the landscape. We are seeing a rise in fraudulent candidates in the tech space. It is something that keeps me up at night. It's very dystopian, very Black Mirror. It's very, very strange. And unfortunately, the people that are getting caught, receiving the brunt of it are real qualified job seekers such as yourselves. So I want to spend a minute talking about how to de-risk and fraudify your resume. Because of course now it's something of an arms race where you have, companies like Ashby or other tools that we utilize starting to build in like AI fraud detection services. So really quick, my homework to all of you is as you are applying, make sure that you're hitting a couple of key things here so that you're not getting caught in the net of these fraud detection systems. A list. Hang on. Okay. So our ATS, specifically Ashby, has a couple of fraud detectors that they look for. One of them is little to no social footprint. Now, love it or hate it, people have varying degrees of distaste, disdain, or love for LinkedIn. But one of the first things that Ashby, and frankly myself as a recruiter, now looks for technical roles is, do you have a social footprint? How up to date is your resume? Do you have a photo? Is it blurry? Is it out of date? If you are an active job seeker, LinkedIn has to be. I know that's going to maybe rankle some feathers, even amongst my recruiting brethren, but that you need to see that as your landing page if you are actively job seeking. And that should be an iterative process that you're updating often as much as possible, right? So that's one component. Another component, is there a big discrepancy in the information between your resume and your LinkedIn profile, right? That is something that will trigger fraud detection as well. I know for a lot of folks, privacy is very important. So what I'm about to say is probably a little controversial. When you are applying to jobs, turn off your VPN, or at least make sure that your VPN is somewhere close to where you are. A lot of fraud detection filters are looking for major geolocation discrepancies and like IP spoofing, because more often than not, scammers and fraudulent candidates are utilizing that. So just keep in mind and keep aware of these things. And this goes into the human component, right? Like, we're not using it to filter people out. We see it as a module on a candidate's profile, and then we're told to double check it, right? Is it fraudulent? Is it not? So there's still a human eye checking it. There's still someone detailing it, but it is such a weird, bizarre, dystopian things. Case, great question. I don't know what their goal is. What I mean by a fraudulent candidate is someone who's either misrepresenting themselves or their skills, or they are very clearly not the person who they say they are. What the end goal is, it's either corporate espionage. I read some articles about like foreign actors trying to get their way into tech companies and steal information. There's all sorts of reasons it could be, but it's unfortunately something, yeah, it is wild. That's something we talk about a lot, and not something we talk about enough publicly, because it's also impacting all of you, right? We now have to spend time trying to parse out and determine, is this person fraudulent or not? But I've definitely have a lot of people show up who have one picture on their LinkedIn are very clearly not someone else when they show up. So is it okay to only be on LinkedIn? It depends on the role. I would say LinkedIn is still probably the standard, is still the bar to have it as your landing page. And that actually brings me back to a point I made earlier about the different streams of job searching. Application's one of them. Look at LinkedIn as your bucket, right? It's your rainwater collection. So you might have 1 to 2 drops fall in and have a recruiter reach out to you, or have someone connect with you about a role. It is still your rain collection bucket. And the best, most effective way for people to do that is if it's fleshed out, it mirrors your resume, you have as much personal, professional information on there as possible. So look at it as another avenue in which for jobs are going to come in. It does depend on your role, your industry, where you're coming from, but I would say for tech, still very much table stakes.
Awesome.
Oh, that was just one thing. That was just the fraud part. Yeah, there was so much more. So much more. Yeah, I can see that caused a lot of discourse, which it goes to show me, it's a good reminder that I live in recruiter world, right? And so I'm seeing all this. I assume that this is a known quantity. It's not. We're seeing it on end. It's happening behind the scenes. It's the fraudulent candidate thing. So do what you can to make sure you're not getting caught up in that if you can. Oh yeah, great example, Kat. Yeah.
Our moderation head on our product support, so she knows all about this exact problem.
I want to go down the route. It is I spend way too much mental energy thinking about fraudulent candidates. It is become sort of my weird cross to bear. I do a lot of research on it because it's a newish thing, and I think they're targeting remote companies specifically. So which are the last couple ones I've worked for. So anyway, do all you can to de-risk that for yourself. As it relates to Pisha's question, how is AI changing what qualified means? So again, our ATSs, our tools, we're still using keywords, and we're still what's changing is that we're using algorithms to use the same keywords we've always used. So that means that candidates you have to make sure that you're writing both for the human eye and for the machine eye, which of course changes how you present the experience. So we used to screen solely for I think more so for pedigree, titles, degrees, company logos. I think one thing that AI is actually doing is a positive and a benefit, at least as it comes to recruiting tools. It is pushing us to measure skills and outputs more than anything, right? It cares less about if anything, it's checking our own bias that we have as humans and recruiters, I think, more effectively. Obviously, it's a human created tool. It comes in, preset with its own biases. I saw a couple of questions from folks talking about, bias and bias data, and that's absolutely a consideration and a concern. But for example, I think one place in which AI is actually a benefit is the shift in helping non-traditional candidates, maybe folks who are in computer science but don't have that master's or computer science degree. If you can show clear, demonstrable skills, projects, impact, code samples, metrics, things like that, it's going to highlight those much more, I guess, evenly than whether it was, when we were manually going through resumes a decade ago. So, in the AI era, I would say that the proof beats the pedigree more so. So I know we're talking a lot about the negative impacts, but I'd say that's actually a positive thing. The next question. Yeah, bias. That's something I feel like we're not talking about enough as it relates to AI in the recruiting world. We did discuss it. I think it was a big talking point, especially in big tech. Most recruiters in tech will tell you they've gone through some anti-bias training or knowing your bias or understanding your own bias training. I myself have been through, dozens. It's always evolving and changing. So as it relates to AI, I think AI is improving fairness, as I mentioned, by focusing on skills rather than background. But I think it's still an open debate as to whether bias can be ever really fully eliminated, right? We are biased creatures. We have our predilections. We have our experiences to inform us. So I think, is AI removing bias? I think it's a little bit of both. I think AI can remove bias in theory, but only if the data you're feeding it isn't biased, which when is that ever the case, right? So it's only as good as its inputs. And so those are the limitations there. Training data reflects historical patterns. So the key here is auditability. Companies are going to test our models for bias and make sure there's humans to spot check and that are in the loop on these things. We're not at a time where robots are just talking to robots yet. I hope we never get there, but I'm sure in some cases that will, especially on the web, you're starting to see that a little bit more. But yeah, I think this is an ongoing conversation, one that we need to have to make sure that those things are not there. But if the user of the tool is biased, the tool itself will be biased. Next question. There's a lot to go through here. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's good though, because I feel like it's answering some of the other questions that are coming through.
Yeah. Well, the next one was about human edge and AI-driven processes. So like how to highlight that, I guess, is what the question means, I think.
Yeah.
Touches on, you had some questions about, emphasizing those human skills. You talked about that. So anything else you have to illuminate?
I can't tell you how many times I've had a candidate talk to a hiring manager And, I think this is company specific. I think I've been pretty privileged to work at places that emphasize a collaborative culture. I don't think that is the case everywhere, but I cannot tell you how many times a hiring manager spoke to a candidate or interviewer spoke to a candidate, and the consensus was essentially, this person is maybe just a hair below what we need technically, but they clearly are hungry. They want to grow. They have a lot of ambition. They lead with empathy. They're open to feedback. Let's hire this person. Those are still the conversations that we're having, even though you look at a job description and it's cold and it's sterile and seemingly a very impersonal process. So you're doing yourself a disservice if you are not doubling down on what makes you human, your ability to listen, to communicate, to integrate feedback, to understand strategy. Are you someone that people want to work with, and are these people you want to work with? Even in this age, in this era of data information and sort of cold hard data, that still matters. As crazy as it sounds, that still matters, at least at the places I have worked.
Well, that's great to hear. And then I guess this one last question, and then we can have a little time for live questions, which I'm excited about like what ethical and privacy concerns should job seekers be aware of? And maybe you don't know of any or not, but I think people are concerned about AI's ability
Yeah.
to get some of that information.
No, it's important. I mean, the veil has been pulled back on the tech industry, right? Like it is a data merchant industry in more cases than not. Or what's the platitude? It's if the company doesn't charge you for the product, that means that you are the product, like your data is the product. So, we do have GDPR laws now. So you can always tell a company if you are concerned, please delete my information, please delete my data. I also think there's a balance on what you put on your resume. I don't expect anyone to put their address anymore. I think the city or the state that they're in is important, but your address is not necessary. Your phone number is not necessary. We can ask that from you later. So if you want to de-risk that on the resume, starting there, I think that's valid and that's fine. Ethical concerns, yeah, I mean, we were just talking about it. And bias, I think, is a big one. The data that you're feeding it, how are companies using it? I think at a broad scope, are companies using this as a lever to make an excuse to cut costs? I think there's a lot of ethical concerns there. In terms of hiring and how we use it as recruiters, I think that's something we need to stay vigilant as a community about. Are we automating too much? Are we taking the human element out? Because I'll let you on a little secret. And you mentioned this earlier, Rachel, about falling into recruiting. I think 99% of recruiters will tell you that exactly. Most of us got into this, or rather fell into this, because we wanted to help people in one way, shape, or form, because we are people pleasers, because we're networkers. It comes naturally to us. So I think, that tension between what the business wants and needs and wants to hire and what recruiters often want to do and advocate for you, there's a tension there. Right? And so I guess I'm calling on my community to make sure that we stay aware of that, that we're not becoming over reliant on AI tools and we're not taking the human element out of it, which is probably in the spirit in which the majority of us got into this line of work.
Oh yeah, I think that's absolutely true based on we've done 26 of these now. I think it's 26, and I feel like that's like a resounding theme in the people who have
Yeah,
talked to us. And I mean, I know the people who come on these things, they have a desire to help people, and that's why they say
there's
yes.
a selection bias there, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I
but
think
still,
that was always the joke. No one ever grew up as a kid saying, I want to grow up to be a recruiter, right?
yeah, totally. Oh, sorry, that's my mouse just went backwards. My bad. So yeah, it'd be great. We've got only 10 minutes left, so maybe we can like kind of speed sal.
Gosh, the chat is popping off.
We've
Wow.
gotten some great questions. It's been awesome. Kat's been in there trying to help with some resources that we already have, but I'm
Okay.
gonna just open up the ability to see everybody in case somebody wants to raise their hands. But I'll go through the questions from the top down, just to be a little democratic about it. Christina had the first question for us. Christina, are you still here? Do you want to ask your question out loud?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Emilio. How are you? I just
Christina.
know about the bias. I work with gender bias, so I'm very concerned about that, about the bias, about the human part, but you
Yeah.
already talked about it. So it's a very interesting topic, actually, right? There's no solution.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that question. It's good to see you. Christina and I know each other. One thing I forgot to mention, and this ties into the resume things, the resume building. Um, I'm starting to see a movement of people taking out like their when they went to college, and I'm fine with that. I think that is fine. I think that's okay. I think that makes sense. We still ask on a lot of application forms like how many years of experience you have. I would love to say we could live in a utopian world in which the years of experience don't matter. Like you pass the interview, you could do the job. And I think to a certain extent there is some leeway within that. I think you have a couple of experiences where someone didn't quite meet the years of experience, but we still hired them for the job, right? I still encourage folks, oh, I don't quite have as many years of experience as the job description says. It's like, okay, sure, but do you have the skills? Do you have the experience? Go ahead and apply and see what happens. So yeah, this question of bias as it relates to gender, as it relates to age and ageism, it's very real. Tech, I think, is notoriously behind the eight ball for those considerations. So I would say do whatever you feel is necessary without stripping away essential information regarding that, right? So a good example, not necessarily putting the years in which you went to college, but at the end of the day, we're still want to meet you, meet the human, and check ourselves as it relates to bias. And so that's something that we need to continue to talk about and stay on top of.
Awesome. And then we have a question from Ben. Some of the other questions were kind of answered in the conversation. So I'm going straight to Ben Pitt's question about a diverse resume. Do you want to ask your question out loud, Ben?
Yeah, I was part of a company for a few years. I have a background mostly in sales. And while I was at the company, we sold 100% of our capacity for production. So I essentially did everything. And I'm noticing I've had a couple run-ins with people saying I'm overqualified for certain roles as I'm trying to go more into account executive, something I really enjoyed working with my clients. So I'm kind of noticing, like, should I start pulling things out of my resume, like the fact that I fundraised and that I've worked with investors and I did all of that? Should I just like pull that completely out of my resume?
That's a very valid question, Ben. I appreciate it, and I'm sorry that it must feel so invalidating, right? To be like, I've done all this stuff, and you mean to say that that's coming against me? I would say don't pull it out, but tailor it, right? So if you are applying for a role and you have a bunch of skills that they go beyond the scope of the role itself, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. What is relevant, what is concise, what is applicable. So if you need to fine tune it and tweak it to only put in the things that are the most relevant to the role that you're applying for or being contacted for, yeah, I would say that's fine. And then of course, once you talk to a human, once you talk to the recruiter, once you talk to the hiring manager, then you can razzle dazzle them, right? It's like, well, you saw that on my resume. I've also done all these other things. So I can do the essentials of the role that you are, considering me for, and I can grow into more potentially. Ben, are you finding that they're telling you you're overqualified in terms of like comp, or they're not even considering you?
Not even
Like what?
not even considering.
Not even considering.
I've
Okay.
ran into it in some sales and account executive roles where they said I might have a little too much experience, and then because it wasn't a big shop, I don't have enough experience to say team lead.
Got it. Yeah, I know what you mean. So you're kind of in that liminal space. So yeah, I mean, I think that's going to a couple things. It'll require a little more intention regarding the roles that you apply for. I mean, hopefully a good recruiter and a progressive-minded company is going to look at your experience and try and find something for you and try and find the right role for you, even if it's later on down the line. But again, going back to what I was saying earlier, when a job is posted, that means that job is available right then, right now, and that's their highest priority. But it'll be good to keep in touch with those people and see if they come around back to you. And as you continue to apply, yeah, I think it's perfectly reasonable to tailor your resume to be a little more discreet in what you bring to the table. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Awesome. And we have a really interesting question from Aten. I might be saying her name wrong. I'm sorry. Do you want to ask your question out loud? It's about soft skills on resumes.
Yes, it's Aton. I'm happy to read it.
Hey,
So my question was that a lot of people are suggesting listing soft skills on resumes. I gave a couple examples, like cross-functional collaboration. Now, are these the kind of things that have any utility to put on a resume beyond a junior level? Do you ever, when you're searching for somebody, I'm thinking specifically roles where these are very key skills necessary. Do you ever filter for that kind of skill on a job search?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Even for my technical roles, right? And again, I think this goes into getting that sort of anecdotal data around a company. Like where I work at Rad AI, we really emphasize the cross-functional collaboration, not working in a silo. We are a remote company, so it is very key that we hire people that know how to do that and are effective and comfortable in doing so. So if that's in the job description, if it's listed in the pillars of the company culture, you absolutely should be mentioning it. I have worked in cross-functional pods, or rather, I've been honed in on one specific pod. You know, if the company is calling for a software engineer that's working across different teams and stacks, that's got to be mentioned too. So yes, we do filter for soft skills. I have AI filters that will auto-generate saying, you know, based on the job description, you're looking for someone who has mentioned that they're cross-functionally collaborative, have worked in different pods, you know, has led different projects, managed people, et cetera, et cetera. That is absolutely the case.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, fantastic question. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I think it did. I'm going to call on Daryl because he has his hand up, so I'm just going to switch to some hand raising questions.
Cool. I'll make it quick. So, Emilio, I've been in enterprise sales for over a decade. And with that, I've watched the evolution of AI technology. And now I'm able to wield that same technology and create software solutions and more. So, how do I navigate creating small business applications or B2C applications and at the same time looking for that next enterprise role? Do I talk about it on my resume? Is it an interesting thing to bring up at the beginning to say that I'm active doing something, or is it a threat?
Great question. Let me make sure I'm fully grasping it. So what you're wondering is it sounds like you're ready to go into that next stage in your career and you're wondering just what to focus on and how you've leveled up and skilled up your AI skills. Am I capturing that?
Yes, and with that, bringing to production applications or web apps to solve solutions in the real world.
Yeah, got it. I mean, yeah, if that's a skill and that is something that you can bring to the table that's a cherry on top to a sales role, then I think that's absolutely important. Now, you mentioned something about, is that going to be a threat? I would like to believe that a smart, well-run company is going to see that as a force multiplier and is going to see that as innovation and self-growth and self-development. We all know that not all companies are created that way or created equal. So it's going to be, and I know I'm saying this ad nauseum, but it's going to be a case-by-case basis. I think in total, you know, if you are really passionate about these skills and you're bringing them to the table and you want to utilize them in your next venture, then you need to be going somewhere that's going to value that, right? And that might require a little more fine tuning and tweaking. That might require a little more intention. But you know, if a company's not willing to accept or be interested, invested in this skill set that you're bringing to the table that is so innovative and cutting edge, they're probably not going to make it very long. Let's be honest. So it might be just a forcing function even for you to be looking at the different priorities and projections that these companies are going for in those roles. So it might take a little longer, and I'm just speculating for you to land that, but it's going to end up being a much better fit for your career if that's what you've spent time learning and understanding. I think if I understand your question correctly, I answered it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question.
We unfortunately have run out of time. It's 4:59. I know that there's a lot of questions here, and I'm going to talk just briefly about some ways that maybe we can get answers still to some questions. So Kat did a great job of passing on some resources. We have a blog where we've distilled a lot of the information from Ask Recruiters, where we've had some repeating questions. So do feel free to take a look at that. We also have a Discord channel, which I always join in and see what questions are popping up there. Emilio, you're welcome to join as well. A lot of candidates. And if you want to come in, and there's a webinar discussion channel, if you want to like write your question, I'll try my best to get you an answer for your questions, because we had a lot of really good ones, and I don't like the idea that we aren't going to be able to get to them all, but we have a finite amount of time. And Emilio, you were so thorough and so great fielding the questions that we had.
Me too. These are great questions. I know going back to what I started at the top of the call, I know it's scary. I know it feels intense. I hope that this helped assuage some of the fears and what's the hype and what's not, and what I get to live day to day. I hope that your takeaway is that AI is not necessarily a gatekeeper. It is a tool that you can use to force multiply your own job search. And there is an adaptability component that is required now to understand what that's like. And of course, what's relevant today may not be relevant in a couple of weeks or a couple months. So that's where community, I think, is important, and relaying. I see the side chat going and people sharing information and talking to each other. I think that's so valuable. I think that's so necessary right now. So you're only one call away. You're only one application away from the next great thing. AI can never take away you being a human and what you bring to the table. So when you're feeling down and when you're feeling like it's another rejection slap to the face, just remember that, recall that it's only right around the corner.
Definitely. I love that big takeaway. And I guess the big thing also is like just adaptability. That feels like the big
Yeah.
theme of a lot of conversations about AI and like in the workplace. So awesome. So we will be sharing this full recording with you with a follow-up email. Kat is going to put in the chat, if she hasn't already, the Discord and also a link to our survey. I saw someone had a great suggestion about doing a recruiting shadowing Ask a Recruiter. I love ideas
Oh
from
yeah,
what would be helpful.
great idea.
The survey is a great place to put any suggestions in or people you'd love to have on a session like this. I'm really open to ideas, and also just let us know anything else that you have feedback about. And also there's a way to sign up to always be on the invitation list for Ask a Recruiters. You can come to the next sessions. We've got some great ones coming up in a few weeks. And then that's it. So join our Discord, please fill out the survey, feel free to connect with each other or with any of us on LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff, and watch out for the follow-up email. And also you could follow Wellfound on LinkedIn. I always post the invitation links there as well. That's a great way of kind of keeping in touch. And finally, thank you so much, Emilio. You were amazing. I'm so glad that you spent so much time being so thoughtful about the initial questions that we had. It's clear that you have a passion for helping people, and then just like so much insight on this topic. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, big shout out to you, Rachel, and the Wellfound team and Kat and everyone. Continue to do this. This is so valuable. This is so important. I hope that you're all feeling a little bit demystified around this process, and happy to do it. But big shout out to all of you. Round of applause for all of you. Thank you for doing this, and looking forward to connecting with everyone and maybe meeting some of you in the future. But thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. So nice to see hopefully some people again. Okay.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Ready to find your next role or discover top talent? Visit us at wellfound.com.